We go back to our trembling girl. So then we've got this quite boring word stood. Stood is quite neutral. What is it sad? Is it happy? Is it good that she's by this window? We don't know yet. So we can leave it as it is and instead make looking interesting. That is slightly easier because looking has more obvious like synonyms, like words that mean similar things. But for the sake of argument, we can take a small girl, we could use the word perched, we could use the word um what could we use? Hovered. A trembling girl hovered, and I'm going to change the order of the sentence here. Hovered near the gaping window. I'll explain that in a second. Near the gaping window and gazed, or maybe peered out of it from behind heavy curtains. Okay, so I've rushed ahead here, but let me explain what I've done. So instead of changing the word window, I've just added an interesting adjective. We've got this girl who theoretically we're trying to describe her as quite small and delicate. Um, we haven't actually used the word small here, but trembling has the connotations of like leaves and other light things that tremble. So it has got a small idea, an idea of her being small in the word already. But it's quite subtle. You can obviously say a small trembling girl hovered near the gaping window. Gaping has the idea of being big and expansive, and so it contrasts with the girl. It makes it just automatically makes the window seem like a threat to her in like a small kind of way. And peered out of it. Peered has an idea of cautiousness to it. So it's not that she's like looking directly, she's kind of like nervous. You can even, if you want to make it more obvious, you can say peered nervously out of it from behind the heavy curtains. You can obviously, this can be more interesting. We could change curtains to drapes, which is a more dramatic word, an old-fashioned word. Um, and we could describe what they look like. This is a good opportunity to use one of our senses that is not sight. So one thing that you will probably naturally find yourself doing is doing all of your description about what you can see. But the way to get really good descriptive writing is to think about what can I see, what can I hear, what can I touch, what can I taste, what can I smell. Specifically, what can I hear and what can I smell are really important because those are the ones that really immerse the reader into the writing. Smell is very much linked to memory, and so this can help the reader feel really like emotionally engaged in the piece of writing. Um, but here we might be able to use the sense of touch. It's not always that we say the person touched the thing and felt like it felt rough, it felt soft. It's more like using words that we only know those words, what those words mean in relation to touching something. So the heavy, velvety, velvety drapes, like this evokes your senses because you're thinking, oh, I know what it feels like to touch something heavy and velvety, and suddenly you're immersed in the writing. Um, so hopefully you can see that this sentence is better than the first one. It's more descriptive and it tells us something about what's happening. So if I say a small girl stood looking out of a window, you're a bit like, okay, tell me more. Whereas if I tell you a small trembling girl hovered near the gaping window and peered nervously out of it from behind the heavy velvety drapes, you're still like, tell me more, but you probably would be able to ask more specific questions like, why is she scared? Why is she hiding? Why is she in such a big house? Like all of these, why is she in such a fancy house? All of these, you've got all these clues of like other information that I haven't told you yet. How do you know that it's a big house? Because it's got big windows. How do you know that it's a fancy house? Because it's got these old-fashioned curtains. How do you know that she's scared? Because she's trembling. It's like being it's like being a detective or like the opposite of a detective. When you're the one analyzing the writing, you're a detective and you're trying to work out like how they created the effect. Here, you are the one like giving the clues to the reader. I'm not telling you it's a big house, but I'm telling you it's a fancy house. but I'm telling you this thing about the the curtains to give you like a clue that it's probably quite fancy. Um, that links me to what like another piece of advice that I would give you when you move on from just writing these sentences to writing your whole piece. I think that you should do a few things before you sit down to write. So you're only going to write 300 words and it needs to be really descriptive. But before you write, you are going to plan. It's harder to plan than for a story because a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it has characters who want things, and that's how the story progresses. But the things that I think you should decide before you start writing descriptively is you're going to decide a mood, which we've already talked about, and then you're going to decide some secret story information. So in this example here, describe the sun rising over a special place, question three. Um, the kind of questions you might ask yourself before you start writing is, what is the special place? Who is there and why? Because although you're not necessarily going to talk about those characters in great detail, it's good for you to know. So, um, when I was writing this sentence, I knew that this girl, like the girl standing looking out the window, what kind of house is she in? Why is she looking out the window? Um, who is this girl? It's good for me to know those things because even though I'm not necessarily going to tell you as a reader, it helps me tell a story with my writing if I know those things in advance. Um, okay, we're going to write this other sentence. The dog ran into the river with an excited mood or an exhilarating mood. Um, and so we're going to use a simile here. So I'm just going to leave the dog. The dog is just a dog. You don't have to make every single word in the sentence interesting. Actually, like art, it's all about like emphasizing some things and not emphasizing other things. So here I'm mostly concerned about the action because it's an excitement piece. It's about making it exciting. We're going to major on like giving lots of detail to the actions and less detail to the nouns. Um, so we're going to say the dog. Um, maybe we'll use that word scampered. Is that the word we used? We found earlier and word hippo. Anyway, the dog scampered like um let's just go for a really cliche simile, like a toddler, um, or maybe like a child in a candy store into the spluttering river. Okay, so you see that we've changed the verb to a slightly more interesting verb. Scampered is this idea of like enthusiasm and speed and it not being accurate or dainty at all. And then a child in a candy store is obviously a really common simile. If you can, like choose a more interesting simile, but for the sake of example, we're going to do that. And then again, we're going to sort of like, I'm going to parallel or mirror, like the dog is moving in like an untethered way, and the river is also moving in an untethered way. And so you get this kind of like, oh, something's happening kind of feeling. Um, if instead we wanted to have like a calm mood, we would say like the dog we might, if we're doing a calm mood, we might spend more time describing the dog to slow it down. This is kind of like how you can choose. This is called pacing. So if you want it to be calm, you spend more time describing things and people and places. If you want it to be fast, you major on those verbs. So you can say the fluffy dog lolloped, which I'm not sure is actually a word, but it's a nice word if it like it's a word you can use. I guess it must be a word. It means kind of like to move in like a kind of ploddy kind of way. The fluffy dog lolloped lazily um, down to the edge of the water and stuck her little nose into the gentle flow. So it's basically saying the same thing, but we've used all sorts of different words. So we've slowed it down, basically. Like we've added in an extra adverb, and then instead of like into the river, we've said to the edge of the water. This is like another thing you can do is like good description is full of specific details, but also sometimes we don't say things directly. So instead of saying it's a river, we just say the edge of the water. We now have a question like, what kind of water is this? Is it the sea? Is it the pool? Is it the river? Like, and it like you can choose here I'm going to zone into like a really specific detail and be really accurate, and here I'm going to be a bit hazy and like give broad strokes. Again, like you're painting a picture. And so what you choose to focus on, here we're focusing in on the dog and everything else is blurry in the background. So the water is just a background detail and the dog is what's in focus. We can see like we've put her in focus because we're talking about like specific parts of the dog, stuck her little nose into the gentle flow. And so if you think of a photograph where like the main bit is clarified and the background bit is really fuzzy, that's something you can do with your writing by choosing what to give details to.